Once upon a time, there lived two friends named Ifeoluwa and Bolanle, and they have been friends for so many years. Ifeoluwa comes from a very wealthy home, and her parents owned several hectares of land in the village, as well as numerous cows. Bolanle lived alone with her poor father, who was a farmer, but this did not impede on her friendship with Ifeoluwa. Oftentimes, Ifeoluwa would bring farm produce from her father's farm for Bolanle and her father, as she treated them like part of her own family. This went on for a while till Ifeoluwa decided to plead with her father to give Bolanle and her father a small portion of land that they could farm on. After several pleas, Ifeoluwa's father agreed and gave Bolanle and her father a small portion of land, and they were so excited. Ifeoluwa ensured that Bolanle and her father never lacked anything, and after several years, Bolanle's father began to make so much money from his farm produce, as he was the sole supplier of cashews in the village. Bolanle's father made enough money and purchased several plots of land in the village. They became so rich and popular, and even built a new house, as their status in the society had changed. One calm evening, Ifeoluwa's father slumped whilst walking in his garden, and he died. The news of his death spread around the village, and several villagers came to mourn with Ifeoluwa and her family. And according to tradition, Ifeoluwa, being the first daughter of her father, was prohibited from leaving the confines of her home following her father's death, as tradition stipulated that the first daughter of a deceased man was not to be seen in public 30 days after the burial of her father. So, Ifeoluwa remained indoors as she mourned the death of her father. It was a very terrible time for her, as she was so close to her dear father. 7 days passed, and Bolanle, her best friend, had not come around to pay condolence visit to her. "I hope Bolanle is okay," Ifeoluwa thought to herself as she began to get worried. Few days later, and still no word from Bolanle. So, Ifeoluwa sent a messenger to Bolanle's house to make sure that no harm had come to Bolanle and her father. She wondered what had kept Bolanle away, as she was sure that the news of her father's death would certainly have gotten to Bolanle's ears. The messenger got to Bolanle's house and delivered Ifeoluwa's message, but Bolanle did not send any message back. When Ifeoluwa heard that Bolanle was good and well, she was extremely sad, as she wondered why her best friend would desert her at a time like this. As each day passed, Ifeoluwa wished and hoped her friend would come through the door to mourn with her. But the number of times she hoped was met with an equal amount of disappointment. Now the 30 days had elapsed, and still Bolanle was nowhere to be found. So Ifeoluwa decided to pay Bolanle a visit herself to understand the reason behind Bolanle's action. This was the longest Ifeoluwa had stayed without seeing or hearing from her friend, and she was greatly bothered. When Ifeoluwa arrived at Bolanle's house, she saw Bolanle talking with a group of ladies through her window, and this broke her heart. So, Bolanle now has new friends that have made her to forget about me. How can she be so wicked and heartless? Or was she only my friend because of my father's wealth? She thought to herself as she returned back home in pains and heartbroken. Ifeoluwa could not confront Bolanle as she was deeply hurt. So, she decided to keep to herself and move on, as Bolanle had proven to her that she had never been a friend to start with. Several weeks went by, and Ifeoluwa took over her father's businesses and wealth. She then sent a messenger to tell Bolanle and her father to vacate the land her father had given to them when he was alive, as she now had need of the land. Ifeoluwa took over the said land and built a big barn there, where she stored yams she got from her father's plantation. Many months passed, and Ifeoluwa was in her father's barn when someone tapped on her shoulder. She turned and saw Bolanle's father, and she was in complete shock. "Good day, sir. Hope all is well." From the look on his face, Ifeoluwa could tell that all was not well. Bolanle's father immediately bursted out in tears as he told Ifeoluwa that her friend Bolanle was currently dying and had only a few hours to live. He went further to tell Ifeoluwa that Bolanle had made her last wish to see her best friend to explain all that happened. Bolanle was diagnosed with a very deadly disease and told that she had a very short time to live. Bolanle found out about her sickness a day to when Ifeoluwa's father died. So, when the news of Ifeoluwa's father's death got to her, she was so distraught and began to cry. Bolanle wondered why life had to be so unfair, as she could not bring herself to face Ifeoluwa because it would be so difficult for her to hide the sickness from her friend who knew her so well and noticed when things were off with her. So, Bolanle decided not to add to Ifeoluwa's grief by staying away completely, as she could not bear to see Ifeoluwa mourn the loss of her father, in addition to the possibility of losing her best friend too to the cold hands of death. Bolanle loved Ifeoluwa so much to put her through the trauma, but Ifeoluwa was unaware of all these and looked at Bolanle as a betrayer and a bad friend. When Ifeoluwa heard all this, she left everything she was doing and headed straight to Bolanle's house. She ran and began to cry as she wished she went into Bolanle's house the day she came visiting after she completed her 30 days mourning. By the time she got to Bolanle's house, she met everyone in tears. Bolanle had died, and this pierced Ifeoluwa's heart deeply. She cried and cried and cried, as she never got to forgive herself for not being there with her best friend during her last days. The lesson to be learned from this story is that we should not always jump into conclusions. Oftentimes, people disappoint us, but what we might not know is that these people might also be going through a lot in their life. It is wise to communicate with people you care so much about, because only then will you know the truth and reason behind their actions. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. It helps us grow our channel. I'll see you in our next story. Bye.